I never thought one weekend could change everything. It started as just another ordinary evening. My sister Jasmine had been dating Anthony for almost a year, and he was practically a fixture in our house. He was the kind of guy everyone liked. Charming, effortlessly funny, and always the center of attention at family gatherings. I should have seen him as just my sister's boyfriend, but something about him made that impossible. I didn't want to admit how much I looked forward to his visits. The way he leaned against the kitchen counter, rolling his sleeves up as he helped Jasmine cook. The easy way he joked with me, always calling me little bro. Even though we were only a year apart. The times he caught me staring and smirked like he knew something I didn't. But it was harmless, I told myself. Just admiration. Just a stupid crush that would go away if I ignored it long enough. That night, Jasmine had to leave for a last minute work shift, and she asked Anthony to hang around until she got back. "Keep my brother company," she had joked, ruffling my hair like I was still a kid. "Make sure he doesn't burn the house down," Anthony had laughed, slouching onto the couch beside me like he belonged there. "Guess it's just you and me, then." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. The living room felt too small, too intimate with just the two of us. The glow from the TV flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. He stretched his arm across the back of the couch, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. I swallowed hard, forcing my attention back to the movie playing on the screen. But my heart was already racing, and I had a feeling. No, I knew. This night was going to be different. Anthony and I had always had this thing, not that I could name it. From the moment Jasmine introduced us, he had this way of pulling me into his orbit. He wasn't like the other guys she had dated, the ones who barely acknowledged me, who treated me like some kid brother in the background. No, Anthony paid attention. He made jokes at my expense, but always followed them with a grin that made it impossible to be mad. He asked about my favorite bands, teased me about my terrible taste in movies, and never hesitated to steal fries off my plate when we ate together. "You seriously listened to this?" He had laughed once, holding up my phone as he scrolled through my playlist. "What's wrong with it?" I had crossed my arms, feigning offense. He smirked, putting one earbud in and pressing play. Within seconds, he winced. "Yeah, okay. This is a crime against humanity. Give it a chance." I had shoved his shoulder, and he barely budged. "Nah, you're a lost cause," he had said, grinning. But later that week, I had caught him humming one of those songs under his breath. That's how it was with us. Effortless, familiar, yet charged with something unspoken. It wasn't just the teasing, though. It was the way he noticed things about me that no one else did. Like how I tapped my fingers when I was anxious, or how I preferred my coffee with way too much sugar, but only ever admitted to one spoonful. Sometimes I caught him watching me in quiet moments, his expression unreadable, like he was trying to figure something out. And then there were the touches. They weren't unusual, at least not at first. A hand on my shoulder when he leaned in to tell a joke. A playful nudge that lingered just a second too long. Fingers brushing when he passed me the remote. Little things. Small, forgettable things. Except I never forgot them. That night, with Jasmine gone, I expected it to be like any other time we hung out. But then, the storm started. It came out of nowhere. One minute, the night was still and humid, and the next, rain was hammering against the windows, wind howling through the trees outside. A flash of lightning illuminated the living room, followed by a low rumble of thunder that rattled the walls. Anthony glanced outside. "Damn, looks bad." "Yeah." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Jasmine's gonna hate driving in that. She'll be fine," he said, but his voice was softer now, like he could sense my unease. Then the power flickered. Once. Twice. And then darkness. I sucked in a breath. "Oh, great," Anthony chuckled. "Scared of the dark, little bro?" I rolled my eyes, even though my stomach twisted. I wasn't afraid of the dark exactly, But something about the house being so quiet, just the two of us, made the air feel different. Hold up. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, the bright glow illuminating his face. His eyes caught mine in the dim light, and for a second, neither of us spoke. The rain kept pounding outside, the wind howling. The power wasn't coming back anytime soon. "Well," Anthony finally said, his voice lower now, more intimate. "Guess we're stuck like this for a while." And just like that, the space between us felt smaller. The power didn't come back. We waited for a while, the only light coming from Anthony's phone flashlight and the occasional flicker of lightning outside. The house felt different, cloaked in darkness, quieter, heavier. Every little sound seemed amplified. The steady patter of rain against the windows, the creak of the walls settling, the rhythmic tapping of Anthony's fingers against his thigh. He exhaled through his nose and stretched, his arms brushing the back of the couch. "Well, I guess we're roughing it tonight." I glanced at the clock on my phone. Jasmine wouldn't be home for hours. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, guess so." A loud clap of thunder shook the house, and for some reason, I flinched. It wasn't fear, just the suddenness of it. At least, that's what I told myself. Anthony turned to me, his face half lit by the glow of his phone. "You good?" "Yeah, just didn't expect that." I forced out a laugh, but it came out shaky. His lips curved, but there was something softer in his gaze now, something unreadable. "Come on," he said, nudging my shoulder. "Let's set up some candles or something before your phone dies." 2. We moved through the house, gathering whatever light sources we could find. Half-melted candles from the dining table, an old lantern Jasmine kept for emergencies. The whole time, I was hyper-aware of him. The way his arm would brush against mine when we reached for the same thing. The warmth of his body when we stood too close in the narrow hallway. It was nothing. It should have been nothing. But when we returned to the couch, the flickering candlelight made everything feel different, more intimate. The shadows danced across Anthony's face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the slight crease between his brows. I looked away before I could get caught staring. He sat beside me, stretching his legs out. "You know," he said casually, "this reminds me of when I was a kid. Storm knocked out the power for a whole weekend once. My brother and I camped out in the living room, told ghost stories all night." I let out a short breath. "Yeah? That's supposed to make me feel better?" he smirked. "What, you scared?" I scoffed. "Of course not." He shifted suddenly, turning to face me fully, his knee pressing against my thigh. "All right then," he said, his voice lower now, almost teasing. "Since you're not scared, let's make this interesting." I arched an eyebrow. "Interesting how?" Anthony grinned. "You ever play 5 questions?" I shook my head. "What's that?" "It's simple," he said, leaning back against the couch, his arm draping along the backrest behind me. "We take turns asking each other questions. No skipping, no lying, just straight-up honesty." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. I hesitated. "And what do we get out of this?" He shrugged. "Nothing. Just fun. Unless you're too scared to play." That got me. I rolled my eyes. "Fine, you go first." His lips curled in amusement, but he didn't waste time thinking. "All right, what's the dumbest thing you've ever cried over?" I huffed a small laugh, relieved at the lighthearted start. "Okay, I got choked up over a cereal commercial once." Anthony blinked, then threw his head back with a laugh. "No way." It was emotional, okay? I defended, but I was smiling. He shook his head, still grinning. "All right, your turn," I thought for a moment. "What's something you're afraid of that people wouldn't expect?" His smirk faded slightly. He was quiet for a beat, then exhaled. "Being stuck in one place forever," I frowned. "Like, physically?" "Nah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Like, getting too comfortable. Waking up one day and realizing I never really did anything that mattered." Something about the way he said it made my chest ache. I wanted to ask more, but before I could, the wind howled outside, and another loud crack of thunder shook the house. The candle flickered violently. Without thinking, I tensed, and that's when it happened. Anthony's hand, warm and steady, found my knee. It wasn't a big gesture, just a touch, nothing more. But my heart slammed against my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it. I should have pulled away. I should have made a joke, kept things light. But I didn't. I couldn't. The weight of his palm burned through my sweatpants, grounding me, stealing the air from my lungs. And when I finally looked up, his gaze was already on me. Something unreadable flickered in his expression. Curiosity, hesitation, something deeper. His fingers flexed slightly against my knee before he pulled back, clearing his throat. "Your turn," he murmured. I barely heard him. My mind was still stuck on the way his touch lingered, on the heat it left behind. But I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe, to speak. What's something you've never told anyone?" Anthony exhaled through his nose, staring at the candlelight. His jaw tensed. For a long moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, finally, I think about things I shouldn't. The air between us shifted. My pulse thundered in my ears. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, and I felt it more than I heard it. I didn't know what he meant. Not for sure. But I had a feeling, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear the truth. His words lingered in the air between us. I think about things I shouldn't. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the rain continued to hammer against the windows, drowning out the silence that had fallen between us. I should have let it go. I should have laughed it off, moved on to the next question, acted like my heart wasn't slamming against my ribs. But something in Anthony's voice, low, hesitant, almost careful, made it impossible to pretend. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and for a split second, I saw something raw there. A hesitation. A quiet war waging inside him. But just as quickly he masked it, exhaling a short laugh as he ran a hand through his hair. "Forget it," he said. "That was a dumb answer." No, it wasn't. My voice came out steadier than I expected, but my hands curled into fists to keep from shaking. "Just be real with me, Anthony." His jaw tightened. He glanced away, fingers drumming against his thigh. "I don't know if I can." The air between us felt heavier, charged with something I didn't dare name. My pulse pounded in my ears. As I shifted slightly, trying to catch his gaze again, "You always say no lying," I said softly. "No skipping questions, so tell me." A muscle in his jaw twitched. I thought he wasn't going to answer. That he would deflect, make a joke, push me away. But then, barely above a whisper, "I think about you." I forgot how to breathe. His bio. Words hung between us, heavy, irreversible. My throat went dry. "Anthony, I shouldn't," he continued. Voice raw, almost like it hurt to say out loud. "I know I shouldn't. You're my girlfriend's brother, for fuck's sake." He let out a sharp breath, running a hand over his face. But it's not just some passing thought. It's not something I can brush off anymore. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me because I had spent so long convincing myself that whatever I felt, whatever this was completely one-sided. A crush, a stupid infatuation, something I could keep buried. But now I knew I wasn't alone, and it scared the hell out of me. I swallowed. "You really mean that?" He let out a rough, humorless laugh, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Do you think I'd say this if I didn't?" I couldn't stop staring at him, at the way his shoulders tensed, at the way his fingers dug into his jeans like he was trying to hold himself together. This was real. This was happening. And yet, "You're with Jasmine," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm. He flinched, inhaling sharply through his nose. I know. The guilt was there, thick in his voice, but it didn't change the fact that his hands were clenched into fists, like he was fighting himself, like he wanted me anyway. My entire body felt like it was burning. I wanted to tell him that this was insane, that nothing could happen between us, that he needed to forget whatever this was before we both got hurt. But then he looked at me, and suddenly, I couldn't think at all. His gaze was dark, unreadable, searching mine for something, an answer, permission, maybe both. His fingers flexed at his sides, like he wanted to reach out, but wasn't sure if he should. I didn't move. I couldn't. My breath came short, uneven. My pulse thundered in my ears. The space between us felt suffocating, crackling with an energy I didn't know how to control. And then he reached for me. Slowly, carefully. Like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His hand brushed against my jaw, hesitant at first. Just fingertips, barely there, barely. But even that lightest touch sent shivers through me. I sucked in a breath, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. This was wrong. This was reckless. And I didn't care. His thumb traced along my cheek, and my eyes fluttered shut for half a second, overwhelmed by the warmth of his skin. "You drive me fucking crazy," he murmured. I swallowed hard. "Anthony!" But I couldn't finish whatever I was about to say, because suddenly his lips were inches from mine, close enough that I could feel his breath, warm and unsteady. Close enough that if I leaned in even a little, I would cross a line we could never come back from. I should have pulled away. I should have stopped this before it got worse. But then, he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, deliberate, almost careful. Like he was memorizing the shape of my lips. Like he was terrified this was the only chance he'd ever get. I froze for half a second, my brain still catching up to what was happening. But the moment he tilted his head, deepening the kiss just slightly, I melted. Everything else, the storm, the guilt, the million reasons why this was a mistake, disappeared. All I knew was him. The warmth of his lips, the way his fingers tightened around my jaw, the quiet, shaky exhale he let out when I kissed him back. It was intoxicating. It was dangerous, and I wanted more. My hands gripped his shirt without thinking, pulling him closer, letting myself drown in the feeling of him. His other hand slid to my waist, tentative but firm, as if he was still afraid I'd push him away. I didn't. I couldn't. Because this was what I had been trying to bury for so long. And now that I had it, I didn't know how to stop. When we finally broke apart, our breaths were uneven, the air thick with something neither of us knew how to name. Anthony's forehead rested against mine, his fingers still lightly gripping my waist. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, "This changes everything," I whispered. His eyes searched mine, something raw and vulnerable flickering behind them. "I know." His thumb brushed against my skin one last time before he pulled away, exhaling sharply. He ran a hand through his hair, looking like he was trying to steady himself. I swallowed hard, my pulse still racing. We both knew what this meant. We both knew we couldn't undo it. Neither of us regretted it. Not even a little. The moment hung between us, thick with the weight of everything we had just done. The air was warm, charged, and neither of us moved at first. It was like we were both afraid to break whatever fragile thing had just been created between us. Anthony sat back against the couch, exhaling a long breath. His hand still lingered on my knee, the warmth of it seeping through the fabric of my sweatpants. I should have pulled away. I should have put space between us, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to go back to pretending. "Damn," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "That just happened." I let out a short laugh, but my heart was still hammering in my chest. "Yeah, it did." He turned his head to look at me, and for the first time since this all started, there was no hesitation in his eyes, no second guessing, only want. His lips twitched into a small smirk. So, was it as good as you imagined? Heat rushed to my face. Shut up. He laughed, low and warm, and I felt it in my chest. But then, just as quickly, his expression sobered. He looked down at where his fingers were still touching my knee, then back up at me. What now? He asked softly. The question settled in my stomach like a stone. Because for all the fire and urgency in that kiss, for all the unspoken emotions, between us, we still weren't two people who could just be. Not without consequences. I let out a slow breath. I don't know. Anthony sighed, running a hand through his hair. I knew you'd say that. There was no frustration in his tone, only quiet understanding. I shifted so I was facing him more fully, pulling one leg up onto the couch. It's not that I don't... I hesitated, searching for the words. Jasmine? His jaw tensed. Yeah. It was the unspoken weight between us, the thing that neither of us had wanted to acknowledge in the heat of the moment. But now, in the quiet aftermath, there was no avoiding it. I don't want to be something you regret, I murmured. Anthony's eyes snapped back to mine, something fierce flashing behind them. Don't say that. You think I regret this? I hesitated. I don't know. Do you? He stared at me, then shook his head. Not even for a second. The certainty in his voice sent warmth flooding through me. I swallowed. So what do we do? He was quiet for a long time, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing small patterns on my knee. Then, finally, I don't have the answer yet, he admitted. I just know I don't want this to be the last time. My breath hitched. He was looking at me again. And there was something raw in his gaze. Something real. You're the one thing I haven't been able to stop thinking about, he murmured. And yeah, it's messy, and yeah, it's complicated as hell. But I meant what I said earlier. I don't want to be stuck in the same place forever. I don't want to keep doing things just because it's what's expected of me. His fingers tightened slightly on my leg, grounding me. I want to figure this out, he said. With you. My heart clenched. I knew what this meant. I knew what it could mean if we weren't careful. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the answer. I reached out hesitantly, my fingers brushing against his. He caught my hand before I could pull away, lacing our fingers together. The simple act sent a shiver through me. We don't have to have all the answers tonight, I whispered. He nodded slowly, squeezing my hand. Then, can I at least have this? I didn't have to ask what he meant, because I wanted it too. Shifted closer, letting my head rest against his shoulder. He exhaled, his muscles relaxing, and a slow warmth spread through my chest. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, I felt safe. And for now, that was enough. The rain had stopped by the time we finally moved from the couch. The house was quiet, except for the occasional drip of water from the gutters outside. Anthony stretched, his fingers still loosely laced with mine, and let out a tired breath. Wasted. Should probably get some sleep, he murmured, though he made no move to let go of my hand. I hummed in agreement, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. My thoughts were still tangled in the weight of the night, his confession, the kiss, the way my body still felt warm where he had touched me. And yet, for all the uncertainty that lay ahead, I felt okay. No, more than okay. I felt right, Anthony. Shifted, his thumb brushing over my knuckles absent-mindedly. Hey, I glanced up. Yeah? His lips curved into a small, tired smirk. I'm stealing your hoodie. I blinked, caught off guard. What? He gestured to the oversized sweatshirt I had tossed over the arm of the couch earlier. It looks comfortable, and it smells like you. His smirk deepened. I think I've earned it. I scoffed, shaking my head. Oh, you think so? Mm-hmm. He tugged the hoodie on over his head, the fabric swallowing his broad frame. Yep, definitely keeping this. I rolled my eyes, but felt my chest warm at the sight of him wearing something of mine. something small but undeniably intimate. "You're impossible," I muttered. He grinned, stepping closer until there were only inches between us. His voice softened. "You like it, though." I did. I liked this. Us. Even if it was new. Even if we didn't have all the answers. I let out a small breath, tilting my head to look up at him. "You know this isn't going to be easy, right?" "Always." Expression turned serious. I know. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, just quiet certainty. I swallowed. "And Jasmine, we'll figure it out," he interrupted gently. "I won't lie to her. I won't do this the wrong way." His fingers brushed against mine again, grounding me. "But I'm not running from this." The weight of his words settled in my chest, steady and solid. I had spent so long convincing myself that this could never happen. That whatever I felt for Anthony would stay buried, unspoken, forever. But now? Now, I wasn't standing on the edge of something forbidden. I was stepping into something real. I nodded, a slow smile tugging at my lips. "Okay." His own smile softened. "Okay." For a long moment, we just stood there, bathed in the dim glow of the lamp, the quiet settling around us like a blanket. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Anthony reached out and took my hand, fingers lacing through mine with quiet certainty. A promise. A beginning. And as we stood, there, neither of us letting go, I knew. This was just the start.